I was standing in my own kitchen when my son said it. Clear as a hammer strike, cold as winter concrete. "Face it, Dad," Derek said, leaning against the marble countertop I'd installed with my own hands 3 years back. "You're just a ghost in this house. No one would even miss you if you weren't here." Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. The refrigerator hummed. The overhead lights I'd rewired last month buzzed faintly. I stood there with dish soap still on my fingers, looking at this man who used to call me Dad when he needed help with his math homework, who used to wait by the window for me to come home from job sites. I waited for Joanna to laugh it off. I waited for her to say something. She didn't. She just kept scrolling on her phone, sitting at the kitchen table like the moment wasn't even happening. That small, deliberate silence felt like a circuit breaking somewhere deep in my chest. By Monday morning, they would be standing in the lobby of Williams & Associates, voices shaking, faces drained of color, staring at foreclosure notices and frozen bank accounts, and asking how everything could fall apart so fast. But right then, in that quiet kitchen on a Friday evening, all I did was breathe in through my nose and count to 5. I didn't yell. I didn't defend myself. I didn't beg. I just dried my hands on the towel hanging from the oven door, looked at Derek, 28 years old, designer suit, leather portfolio pressed to his chest like a shield, and I said, "Let's find out." He blinked, like he hadn't expected that. Now let me back up a little. My name is Eugene Williams. I'm 58 years old, living in Columbus, Ohio. I've been an electrician most of my life. 34 years of early mornings, freezing crawl spaces, and hands that never quite stopped buzzing. Even when I tried to sleep, my knuckles were thick, my fingers half numb from years of crimping connectors and tightening screws in buildings other people would take credit for. Joanna and I had been married 26 years. We met at a church social, back when I still believed showing up was the same as being seen. She came with expectations, a certain kind of house, a certain kind of life. I gave her both. The 3-bedroom colonial with the wraparound porch, the new SUV every 4 years, the standing reservation at Marcello's for our anniversary. Derek was our only child. I taught him how to use a level when he was 10, my hand hovering over his, my voice steady, even when he'd get frustrated and want to quit. He used to call me his hero, then Dad. Then somewhere along the line, he stopped calling me anything at all. The house, our house, sat on a quiet street with maple trees and neighbors who waved from their driveways. I'd put the down payment on it 23 years ago. My name was on the mortgage. My name was on the deed. My name was on every utility bill, every insurance policy, every piece of paper that kept the lights on and the heat running. Derek liked to call it the family home, especially when he talked about eventually inheriting it. The company had taken over his life lately. Williams & Associates, the contracting firm I'd started with Joseph and Sean 40 years ago. Derek worked there now, wore expensive suits, talked about modernizing operations and disrupting the industry. He had no idea the company was mine. Not partly mine. Mine. I'd moved my ownership into an anonymous trust years back. Kept myself listed as a senior consultant. Let him think I was just the old man who fixed things. I paid for most of his life without keeping score. That's what you do, I told myself. You invest in the people you love. That Friday evening wasn't supposed to be different from any other. I'd come home from a consultation job, hands still smelling like electrical tape, and found Derek in the kitchen with Joanna. They'd been talking about something in low voices, the kind of conversation that stops when someone walks in. Derek's tone changed when he saw me. Got sharper. "You're always just here," he said, gesturing at me like I was furniture. "In the way. Taking up space. Honestly, Dad, what do you even contribute anymore?" I started washing the dishes. Because that's what I did. I cleaned up. I fixed things. I stayed quiet. "You don't get it," Derek continued. "Mom and I have been talking. You're like background noise. You think you're important, but you're not." Joanna shifted in her chair. I knew that shift. She did it when she didn't want to choose sides. Derek took a breath. "Face it, Dad. You're just a ghost in this house. No one would even miss you if you weren't here." I turned off the faucet. Dry my hand slowly. Looked at Joanna. 26 years of marriage, shared bank accounts, quiet Sunday mornings. I search her face for something. Anything. She looked down at her phone. I remember noticing how the kitchen clock sounded louder after that. Tick, tick, tick. Let's find out, I said. That night, I packed a single duffel bag. Work clothes, my electric razor, a change of shoes. I left the rest. The family photos on the mantle. The recliner I'd sat in every Sunday for a decade. The garage full of tools I'd collected over 34 years. I left my house keys on the kitchen counter, right next to the mortgage bill with my name on it, right next to the insurance policy that listed me as the sole policyholder. Joanna stood in the hallway, arms crossed. Where are you going? Derek said I'm invisible. I said, I'm going to see if he's right. I walked out the door I'd installed myself, got in my truck, and drove. That first night, I checked into a quiet motel off Route 71. The kind of place with thin walls and a coffee maker that smelled like burnt plastic. I sat on the edge of the bed, springs creaking, staring at the blank television screen. My phone started lighting up around 9 o'clock. Text from Joanna. This is ridiculous. Come home. You're being childish. Nothing from Derek. By Saturday morning, the calls started. Joanna, then Joseph from the company, then Sean. 47 missed calls by noon. I didn't answer. Instead, I went to the diner across the street and ordered eggs and toast, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that actually tasted good for once. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel my fingers twitching toward a toolbox that wasn't there. Subscribe to see how this unfolds and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. I spent Saturday morning in that diner booth watching people come and go. Families, couples, people with nowhere particular to be. The waitress kept my coffee cup full without asking, and I left her a $20 tip on a $12 check. My phone kept buzzing. I would look at it, see the name, and set it back down face down on the Formica table. Joanna, Joseph, Joanna again. A number I didn't recognize that was probably Derek calling from someone else's phone. Around 10:30, I paid and walked back to the motel. The parking lot was mostly empty except for a few cars with out-of-state plates and a semi-truck idling in the corner. I sat in one of those white plastic chairs outside my room and watched the highway traffic for a while. It was strange, sitting still. I couldn't remember the last time I had done it. There was always something that needed fixing. A pipe. Agua. A problem that was somehow mine to solve, even when nobody asked. Back at the house, Saturday mornings had a rhythm. I would be up by 6, checking the furnace filter, tightening the loose railing on the back deck, replacing washers and faucets that dripped just loud enough to bother me at night. Joanna would sleep until 9, then spend an hour getting ready before heading out to meet her book club or her yoga class or whatever filled her Saturdays. Derek would show up around noon if he showed up at all, let himself in with his key, raid the refrigerator, and leave his dishes in the sink for me to wash later. That was the routine. It had been for years. But this Saturday, I wasn't there. And I knew, with the kind of certainty you get from doing the same job for 3 decades, that things were already starting to break. The automatic payment for the mortgage was set to pull from a main account on the 15th of every month. But the account required a 2-factor authentication code that only came to my phone. Every single month, the bank would send a code. I would enter it. The payment would go through. I had set it up that way on purpose 5 years ago after Joanna had transferred $8,000 to her sister without telling me. For an emergency, she had said when I found out. The emergency had been new patio furniture. So I had made sure every major transaction needed my approval. My phone. My authorization. This month, the 15th was today. Saturday, October 15th. The code would come through. I wouldn't enter it. The payment wouldn't process. I sat in that plastic chair and felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I didn't pull it out. The house insurance was the same setup. Auto pay, 2-factor authentication, renewal date the 16th. Tomorrow, the notification would come. I wouldn't respond. The policy would lapse. The business accounts were more complicated but followed the same pattern. I was listed as the primary on every account at Williams & Associates. Joseph and Sean could access the operating funds for materials and payroll, but anything over $5,000 required my signature. Transfers, loans, major purchases. We had a big job starting Monday. New commercial building downtown, 60-unit apartment complex. Sean had been coordinating it for months. The electrical contract alone was worth $400,000. But the client required a performance bond, and the bond required my signature as the primary guarantor. Sean had sent me the documents on Thursday. Need these signed by Monday morning, his email had said. Client won't release the deposit without them. I hadn't signed them. They were sitting in my truck, in a folder under the passenger seat. My phone buzzed again. I looked at the screen this time. Joseph. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Joseph. I let it ring. He called 4 more times in the next 10 minutes. On the 6th call, I answered. Gene, he said, and I could hear the panic in his voice before he said anything else. Where the hell are you? Sean's been trying to reach you all morning. I'm around, I said. We need you at the Riverside site. The inspector showed up early, and he's saying the panel configurations don't match the approved plans. Sean's losing his mind. He says you're the only one who can explain the modifications we made. Sean can handle it, I said. There was a pause. Gene, what's going on? This isn't like you. I'm taking some personal time. Personal time? Gene, we got the Eastview contract signing Monday morning. You need to be there. The client specifically asked for you. I won't be there, I said. What do you mean you won't? Gene, this is a $400,000 job. We need your signature on the bond. We need you in that meeting. You'll figure it out, I said, and I hung up. The phone rang again immediately. I turned it off. I sat there for another hour, just watching the cars go by. A family pulled into the motel lot. Mom, Dad, 2 kids fighting in the back seat. The dad looked exhausted, the kind of tired you see in a man's shoulders. The mom was on her phone, not looking at any of them. They reminded me of us. 20 years ago, maybe, before Derek stopped looking at me like I knew anything worth knowing. Around 1 o'clock, my stomach reminded me I hadn't eaten since the eggs at breakfast. I drove to a sandwich shop a few miles down the road, ordered a turkey club, and ate it in my truck with the windows down. While I turned my phone back on, there were 63 missed calls. Joanna, Joseph, San, Derek. A number I recognized as the bank. Another one that was probably the insurance company. There were text messages too. I scrolled through them slowly. Joanna, this is childish. Come home. Joanna, Eugene, I'm serious. Where are you? Joanna, the credit card isn't working. What did you do? That last one had a timestamp of 12:47 p.m. I read it twice, then kept scrolling. Joseph, Gene, call me ASAP. We have a serious problem. Sean, where are you? Inspector red-tagged the Riverside panel. Need you here now. Derek, Mom says you left. What's going on? I set the phone on the dashboard and finished my sandwich. The credit card. Of course. Joanna had 3 cards. 2 were in her name, connected to her personal account that I deposited money into every month. $1,500. Household expenses, we called it, though I paid all the actual household expenses from my account. The $1,500 was for her yoga classes, her lunches with friends, her trips to the salon. The 3rd card was the family card, Black American Express, connected to the main account, the one I use for everything important. Emergencies, large purchases, the one that had a credit limit high enough that Joanna liked to use it when she wanted to impress her friends. That card required my authorization for every transaction over $200. Another security measure I had put in place after the patio furniture incident. Saturday was her charity luncheon, the one she had been talking about for weeks. Some fundraiser at the country club, $200 a plate event. She was bringing 3 friends, so $800 total, plus whatever she would spend at the silent auction. She would have tried to use the family card. The authorization request would have come to my phone. I hadn't approved it. I imagined her standing at the registration table, handing over the card with that confident smile she wore when she knew people were watching. The woman behind the table swiping it once, twice, then looking up with that apologetic expression people get when they have to deliver bad news in public. I'm sorry, Mom. This card has been declined. The smile would have frozen on Joanna's face. She would have laughed, said there must be some mistake, tried it again. Same result. Then she would have fumbled for one of her personal cards, the ones with the lower limits, already doing the math in her head and realizing she didn't have enough available credit to cover $800 plus auction bids. Her friends would have been standing there, watching. My phone buzzed with a new message. I looked at it. Joanna, you did this on purpose. You're trying to humiliate me. I set the phone back down and drove back to the motel. The room was exactly as I had left it. Bed still made with those tight hospital corners. My duffel bag on the chair by the window. The air conditioning unit humming in the wall. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. Beige walls. Painting of a lighthouse bolted to the wall. Carpet that had probably been brown once, but had faded to something between tan and gray. It wasn't much, but it was quiet. I lay back and stared at the ceiling. There was a water stain in the corner, shaped like an hourglass. I found myself tracing the edges of it with my eyes, following the discoloration where moisture had seeped through from the room above. That's what I had been for 34 years. The person who saw the water stain before it became a leak. The person who noticed the circuit breaker that was starting to arc before it started a fire. The person who caught all the small failures before they became catastrophes. I had spent my whole life holding up the ceiling for people who never looked up. Joanna never looked up. She lived in the rooms I maintained, drove the car I serviced, spent the money I earned, and never once asked how any of it worked. The lights came on when she flipped the switch. The heat came on when she turned the thermostat. The water was hot when she turned the faucet. Magic. Derek never looked up either. He had grown up in a house where nothing ever broke because I fixed it before it could. He had learned to expect that everything would just work, that someone else would handle the complicated parts, that the infrastructure of his life was something he never needed to think about. I was the infrastructure. And infrastructure is only noticed when it fails. My phone rang again. I let it. It rang 17 more times over the next hour. I counted. Around 5 o'clock, I walked down to the motel office and asked if they had any rooms available for the week. The clerk, a kid who couldn't have been more than 20, looked at me like I had asked him to solve a calculus problem. You want to stay a whole week? Yes. Let me check with my manager. He disappeared into the back room. I could hear him talking to someone, though I couldn't make out the words. He came back a minute later. Yeah, we can do that. Same room. Same room. He processed the payment, handed me a receipt, and went back to whatever he had been doing on his phone before I walked in. I went back to my room and ordered a pizza from a place across the highway. When it arrived, I ate it sitting in that plastic chair outside, watching the sun go down behind the gas station across the street. The sky turned orange, then pink, then purple. The highway lights flickered on. Traffic thinned out. A few more cars pulled into the motel lot. Travelers. People passing through. Nobody staying. Except me. I was staying. My phone had gone quiet around 6. No more calls. No more texts. I turned it on and scrolled through the messages I had missed. Joseph. Gene, we lost the Riverside job. Inspector shut us down. Client is threatening to sue. Call me. Sean, I don't know what's going on with you, but this is serious. We need to talk. Joanna, Fine. Stay gone. See if I care. Derek. Dad, Mom is freaking out. Whatever you're doing, stop it. This isn't funny. I set the phone on the plastic table next to my chair and watched a moth circle the light above my head. It kept hitting the bulb, bouncing off, circling back. Over and over, never learning. I thought about calling them back. Explaining. But what would I explain? That I was tired of being invisible until something broke? That I wanted them to see me while I was still here, not just when I wasn't? They wouldn't understand. Not yet, but they would. By Monday morning, they would understand exactly how much they had been taking for granted. They would understand what it meant when the person holding up the ceiling finally let go. I finished my pizza and went inside. The bed was uncomfortable, the pillows too thin, the sheets rough. But I slept better than I had in years. Because for the first time in decades, I wasn't worried about what would break while I was sleeping. I wasn't listening for the furnace to kick on wrong, or the pipe to start dripping, or the smoke detector to chirp its low battery warning. I was just sleeping. And somewhere across town, in the house with the wraparound porch and the maple trees, the dominoes I'd set in motion were starting to fall. Sunday morning, I woke up at 6 out of habit. The motel room was dim, curtains pulled tight against the parking lot lights. I lay there for a few minutes, listening to the silence, then got up and took a shower that ran cold after 3 minutes. I dressed in clean clothes from my duffel bag and walked down to the same diner. Different waitress this time, older, with reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. She brought me coffee without asking and took my order with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this for 30 years. Eggs, toast, hash browns. My phone had been buzzing since I woke up, but I had left it in the room. I didn't need it to know what was happening. Sunday was when Derek usually drove out to check on the rental property on Oakmont Street, the duplex I had bought 12 years ago as an investment. Derek managed it, collected the rent, handled the tenant issues. He thought it was his. I had let him think that, but the deed was in my name. The property taxes were paid from my account. The insurance policy listed me as the owner. Last month, one of the tenants had filed a complaint with the city about a gas leak. The city inspector had come out, found a problem with the main line, and issued a violation notice. The notice required the property owner, me, to hire a licensed contractor to fix it within 30 days or face daily fines. The 30-day deadline was tomorrow, Monday. Derek had called me about it 2 weeks ago, asking me to co-sign the work authorization since my name was on some of the paperwork. I had said I would take care of it. Then I hadn't. The contractor needed a signature and a deposit before they would start work. $5,000. The signature had to be mine. I ate my breakfast slowly, cutting the eggs into small bites, spreading butter on each piece of toast. The hash browns were crispy on the outside, soft in the middle. Perfect. When I got back to the motel, my phone was where I had left it on the nightstand. The screen showed 47 missed calls. I picked it up and scrolled through them. Derek had called 16 times starting at 7:30 this morning. Joanna had called 12 times. Joseph, 8 times. Sean, 6 times. The rest were numbers I didn't recognize. The voicemails had stopped around 9. I assumed they had given up or run out of things to say. There were text messages, too. I read them while I sat on the edge of the bed. Derek, Dad, the city is threatening to condemn the Oakmont property. I need you to call me right now. Derek, this is serious. They're saying the owner has to sign off on the repairs. Your name is on the deed. Why didn't you tell me? Derek, I could lose everything. The tenants are threatening to sue. The city is issuing fines. Where are you? Joanna. Eugene, this has gone far enough. Derek is in trouble. You need to come home and fix this. Joseph. Gene, I don't know what's happening with you, but Sean and I are scrambling to save the Eastview contract. The client is furious. We need you in the office first thing Monday morning. I set the phone down and looked out the window. The parking lot was mostly empty now. Sunday morning. People had checked out, moved on, gone wherever they were going. I spent the rest of Sunday doing nothing. I read a paperback someone had left in the lobby, a thriller about a man hunting down the people who had wronged him. It was predictable, but it passed the time. I ate lunch at a Chinese place down the road. I took a nap. I watched the sun set from that same plastic chair. My phone rang a few more times, but I didn't look at it. Monday morning arrived cold and gray. I woke up at 5, showered, and put on the cleanest work shirt I had. I stopped at a different diner this time, one closer to downtown, and ordered coffee and pancakes. The breakfast rush was just starting. Construction workers, office people, everyone moving with that Monday morning urgency, like if they didn't hurry, they would miss something important. I ate slowly. My phone started ringing at 7:15. I watched it light up on the table next to my plate. Derek. I let it ring through to voicemail. It rang again 30 seconds later. Joanna. Then Joseph. Then a number I didn't recognize. The waitress came by with a coffee pot. Popular guy this morning, she said, nodding at my phone. Something like that, I said. She topped off my cup and moved on to the next table. By the time I finished breakfast, I had 23 new missed calls. I paid my check, left a good tip, and walked out to my truck. The office was downtown, a low brick building on 4th Street that we had bought 15 years ago when the business was doing well. I pulled into the parking lot at 8:30. Joseph's truck was there, Sean's too, and Joanna's SUV, which meant Derek was probably with her. I sat in my truck for a minute, watching the building. Through the front windows, I could see movement, people pacing, someone on the phone. I got out and walked to the entrance. The lobby was chaos. Joanna was at the reception desk, talking to our secretary, Marianne, her voice sharp with panic. Derek was on his phone, pacing near the window. Joseph and Sean were standing near the conference room, both of them looking like they had aged 10 years since Friday. They all stopped when I walked in. Joanna saw me first. Eugene. She said my name like an accusation. Where have you been? Around, I said. Derek ended his call and walked toward me. Dad, we have a serious problem. Multiple problems. The house. I know, I said. You know. Joanna's voice went up an octave. You know that the mortgage didn't go through? You know that the insurance lapsed? You know that we had city inspectors at our house this morning because the property taxes are overdue. Overdue by 2 days, I said. The grace period is 30 days. That's not the point. She was almost shouting now. The point is that you disappeared and everything fell apart. The credit cards, the accounts, the property violations. The Eastview contract, Joseph cut in. His voice was quieter than Joanna's, but there was an edge to it I hadn't heard before. Gene, we lost it. For $100,000. The client walked away this morning because we couldn't provide the sign bond. I nodded. I figured they might. You figured. Joseph stared at me. Gene, what the hell is going on with you? I walked past them into the conference room. There was a long table in the center, surrounded by chairs. I set my keys down on the table and pulled out a folder I had been carrying under my arm. They followed me in. All of them. Joanna, Derek, Joseph, Sean. They stood around the table like I was about to explain a wiring diagram. I opened the folder and pulled out a stack of papers. Documents I had printed at the FedEx office yesterday afternoon while they were all calling me. This, I said, sliding the first page across the table, is the mortgage statement for 847 Maple Drive. You'll notice my name is the only name on the loan. Joanna is listed as a resident, not a co-borrower. Joanna picked up the paper, her hands shaking slightly. I slid another page across. This is the deed to the Oakmont rental property. Also in my name. Sole owner. Derek grabbed that one, his face going pale as he read it. This, I said, pulling out another document, is the trust structure for Williams & Associates. I own 70%. Joseph and Sean each own 15%. The trust is structured so that I can dissolve my share at any time with 90 days' notice. Joseph and Sean exchange a look. And this, I said, setting down the final page, is a ledger. I've been keeping it for 3 years. Every deposit I made into the family account. Every bill I paid. Every property tax, insurance premium, mortgage payment, car payment, credit card balance. Everything. I let them look at the numbers. Watch their faces as they added it up in their heads. Over the last 3 years, I said, I've put approximately $473,000 into maintaining the life you thought just happened on its own. That doesn't include the business expenses or the investment properties or the retirement accounts. The room was quiet except for the sound of papers rustling. You called me invisible, I said, looking at Derek. You said no one would miss me if I were gone. So I left. For 3 days. And in 3 days, everything I'd been holding together fell apart. Derek opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I didn't mean. Yes, you did, I said. You meant it. And maybe you were right. Maybe I was invisible. But not because I didn't matter. Because you never looked. Joanna was crying now, quiet tears running down her face. Eugene, please. We can fix this. Just come home. Sign the papers. Make the payments. Everything can go back to normal. No, I said. It can't. I pulled out one more document from the folder. This is a lease agreement for an apartment on Riverside. 1 bedroom. I signed it yesterday. I'm moving on Wednesday. You're leaving us? Joanna's voice cracked. I already left, I said. Friday night. This is just making it official. What about the house? Derek asked. The business? The properties? The house is in my name. I'll continue to pay the mortgage until we decide what to do with it. You can live there if you want, but you'll pay rent. Fair market value. $1,500 a month. Joanna looked like I had slapped her. The Oakmont property needs repairs, I continued. I'll authorize the work and pay for it. But then I'm selling it. You can buy it from me at market value if you want, Derek. Otherwise, it goes on the market. And a business? Joseph asked quietly. I'm stepping back, I said. Not stepping down. You and Sean can run the day-to-day operations. But my name stays on the accounts. My signature stays required for major contracts. And I want a formal salary. $60,000 a year. Consulting fee. Joseph nodded slowly. That's fair. Fair. Derek looked at him. He just tanked our biggest contract. No, Sean said, speaking for the first time. His voice was rough, tired. We tanked it. We spent 40 years letting Gene handle everything and never asked what would happen if he didn't. That's on us. I gathered up my papers and put them back in a folder. I spent 34 years being the person nobody noticed until something went wrong. I said, I fixed your problems. I paid your bills. I held up the ceiling while you lived underneath it, never looking up, never asking how it stayed in place. I looked at each of them. Joanna, still crying. Derek, pale and shaken. Joseph and Sean, both looking older than their years. I'm done being invisible, I said. You want me in your life? Then see me. Actually see me. Not just when you need something signed or fixed or paid for. See me when I'm right in front of you. I picked up my keys from the table. I'll be at the apartment on Riverside if you need me. For anything real. I walked out of the conference room, through the lobby, and out to my truck. Nobody followed me. I drove across town to the Riverside apartment complex. It was a quiet building, older, with trees in the courtyard and a view of the river from the upper floors. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. Small, just big enough for one person who didn't need much. I had brought some furniture from storage yesterday. A bed, a chair, a table. Enough. I stood at the window and looked out at the water. The river was gray under the cloudy sky, moving slowly toward whatever it was moving toward. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. A text from Derek. I'm sorry. Just 2 words. But they were the first 2 words he'd said to me in 3 days that sounded like he meant them. I didn't respond. Not yet. Sorry was a start, but it wasn't enough. Not after 28 years of being taken for granted. But it was a start. I set the phone on the windowsill and looked back out at the river. For the first time in decades, I felt like I could breathe. The ceiling wasn't mine to hold up anymore. They could learn to hold it themselves. Or they could let it fall. Either way, it wasn't my job to catch them. I was just Eugene, not the invisible man, not the ghost in the house, not the silent anchor everyone else relied on without thinking. Just Eugene, and that was enough. Thank you for watching.